Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida. Dude, I'm telling you, dude. Dr. Narco Longo came on and dropped the hammer of the god.
America's mother, daughter of Atlantis. God sent the Wetland. The devil sent the Spanish. Florida is Eden, the fountain of youth. Kali is deception. So Florida is the truth.
Welcome to Florida, baby.
Dr. Narco Longo.
Florida, it is everything. There's too much truth bombs being dropped. I can't digest it all.
Old World, Florida.
Please welcome Dr. Narco Longo.
Yellow.
People aren't playing around.
What's up, everyone?
Gotta get that orange juice up in here.
Guys, give us a thumbs up if our audio is sounding good. This is a new setup we got here. We're all kind of sharing one microphone. Let us know if it sounds good.
Check two.
Say something.
Check three.
All right, guys.
Thumbs
We're
are up.
seeing some thumbs up.
Round table audio. All right, everyone.
Is that you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a call. Sorry.
Damn,
My
dog.
friend Jeffrey. I'm in demand. What can I say?
You are.
Well, guys, we got Christopher Gardner here. We got my brother here too. They did a show not too long ago. Sorry, I don't know where to look quite yet. But
There.
yeah, so
Straight ahead.
we're going to be talking a little bit about what they talked about last time and things like that. But let's make sure our audio is all squared away first. And someone says not the best.
Uh-oh.
Deal with it.
Project.
Christopher, what are you doing in Florida? Let's start off with that.
It's freezing cold in Missouri.
Right.
And to keep my family sane,
Right.
I promised my wife if we're going to move to someplace cold, I'd have to take her someplace warm during the cold time. So that's what you do as a hubby and a daddy.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Nice.
And plus our parents are down here, so we get to see the grandparents, and
Sure.
my little girl gets to play with her grandmas and have a good time.
And you're from here.
Yeah. From
Original,
Fort
right?
Lauderdale, Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Broward County.
Yeah.
Shout out.
B-Town.
And Professor Longo. How long ago was that show you guys did together?
2 weeks ago, maybe?
Yeah,
Something like
three
that.
and a
3
half.
weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not too long
Okay.
ago.
Well, guys, now that we all talked a little bit, give us a thumbs up. See if this is manageable. A couple more thumbs up, and then we'll get started.
Supposed to cut the reverb down? That can't be right. Like they're playing.
Oh, here, maybe it's no.
They're just fucking with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
just-
sounds good. People say it sounds good.
Awesome.
All right. Well, yeah.
I wanted
Where do you want to take it, Toph?
to connect these two worlds,
Yeah.
because what I love about your work specifically is like showing that this was the old world. And by old world, I mean like pre-flood, like
Right.
Noah's land.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes in the vibe of like everything that I was conditioned with like Michelle Gibson's, Amorica, all the stuff with the Mormons that I know that talked about this being like the lost area. I forget of what tribes, and all the relics that Anomaly talks about, that they find that are just like much, much more ancient than, you know, a group of people, settlers coming here 500 years ago. So you talking about that, and then, you know, you and I were just starting to get into like the whole dispensationalist movement that started in the mid 1800s, and like how that literally changed the face of Christianity into like pure Zionism.
Sure.
And like you've been wonderful with uncovering the Byzantine Empire for me. Like when you brought that up, and I heard you, I think you were speaking to Juan about that.
I was, yeah.
And then I was like, what? Like that could be that 1,000-year reign that's spoken about in Revelations. Because I didn't have the history knowledge to know that in 70 AD that Jerusalem was
the temple's destroyed.
The temple was destroyed.
Yeah.
So learning that, and then learning about the actual Constantine moving Rome over to there, I was just like,
right. Yeah, and there's a lot of people who talk about Rome, and basically, you know, they say, "Oh, we're living in Rome. You know, this is the decline," and they don't even know about the lengthier decline. You know, because the Roman Empire continued for another 1,000 years. So people comparing us to Rome are actually completely misled in the timeline, you know?
Yeah.
Like they think like, oh, well, if Rome fell in a few hundred years and we're a few hundred years in, we must be looking like Rome. It's all over. And then it's like, okay, but you're missing the Byzantine, the Eastern Roman Empire. You're missing 1,000 years. You know, on that timeline, America has a long runway, and it's very optimistic. And so, yeah, learning your history can actually increase your optimism. A lot of people learn bad history and become more and more pessimistic, you know.
That's so true.
Stuff like that.
That's so true. And then one angle that, you know, before we started to record, that we were starting to talk about the star forts. And like the architecture of the star forts and what that could mean and how old those might be and how that could actually be a link to much, much older times.
Yeah. Also, before we started recording, we talked about New Smyrna, Florida, a little bit, which I think is probably the biggest link or like strong thread between what I'm into and what my brother's been into a lot recently is St. Augustine. I talk about a lot. New Smyrna, not as much. It's not as well known, you know, around the world. But New Smyrna is a little south of St. Augustine. St. Augustine, they call the oldest city in America, in North America.
Yeah.
The oldest continually inhabited settlement. Well, there's a chance that it's actually New Smyrna, or at least that New Smyrna came first before St. Augustine. In fact, it might have been the original St. Augustine.
Because how far away are they?
No more than 50 miles.
Yeah, it's probably
no more. It's much less.
It's right by Daytona. New Smyrna is.
Yeah.
It's like very close by.
It's like a half-hour drive less. And New Smyrna, there's old maps of St. Augustine that appear to actually be New Smyrna. So I've got a couple videos on that. But if we're just going off, you know, just the mainstream history alone, why is one of the oldest cities in America named after a Greek city? It's a Turkish city today. It's called Izmir, but it used to be known as Smyrna. And that was one of the philosophical kind of,
bridging that.
It was one of the it was like in Athens. It was like, you know, it was one of those level of Greek cities. Smyrna was well known. It produced many well-known philosophers. And, you know, so Smyrna today, it's Turkish, but we get that New Smyrna here in Florida from Smyrna, an ancient Greek city.
Right.
It just so happens, well, that name comes to us from one of the earliest groups of Greeks, if not the earliest, and definitely the biggest group of Greeks to come settle the Americas. So right there in the 1700s, right, this is kind of more Ottoman times still, but you can trace that thread back to Byzantine times because there is some, and more ancient, you know, going back to just ancient Greek seafarers or Phoenician, whatever we would call Phoenician today. But New Smyrna just so happens to have some mysterious ruins in it. They don't know where those ruins come from. And by they, I mean like the mainstream archaeological community. They kind of take guesses. To this day, they don't know for sure. But there's this place called Old Fort in New Smyrna. It looks like a strange ceremonial complex. I've seen other Maya sites that look like it. It looks like ancient Roman kind of foundations too. But they say that was the foundation to a hotel. Some say it was the foundation to a fort. They don't know. But 150 years ago, they still didn't know. You know, they were still kind of guessing at that. And again, also that one in particular is built on top of an Indian burial mound. Of course, which so many are. But that was one of the first places settled in Florida. And it pretty much is St. Augustine. Like the settlement of St. Augustine goes hand in hand with the settlement of New Smyrna. St. Augustine's 1560s. This is 1760s. So before the United States was even a thing, you had about 1,500 Greeks, Menorcans, Ottoman subjects settling America, growing hemp. They were smoking that good kush. They were growing indigo. We're not taught about that in school. Like we learned all the Spanish history. We learned a little bit of the French. We didn't learn about the Greeks in Florida. And they're still here to this day. The Menorcans and the Greeks, they're still there. They have peppers. They have peppers and different things that are unique to them. Even their peppers are mysterious. They don't know if they come from the Mediterranean or if they got it's whatever.
I saw your show on that, tracing that pepper, the pepper question. That's amazing to me because we had hypothesized a little bit that when it came to the Byzantine Empire, they were seafaring. They were the most advanced people on the planet. So more than likely, they made their way all the way around.
Yeah, and he's done great work on the Greek language similarities with Creek and other like Native American languages.
Yeah, you were saying that with the Okeechobee.
Yeah, those are eerie. And then even like the city of St. Augustine. I mean, St. Augustine, the actual person, was Roman.
Yes.
He's living in North Africa, which would make him technically, and which would make him a Byzantine, right? Because this is after Constantine has moved the capital. And so technically you're getting into, people will split hairs on this, but he was Roman for sure. He was Eastern Roman, more or less, because of where he's located. So even just the name, you have things. Yeah. And I was actually talking to somebody else the other day and telling them that, yes, they're seafaring people, and Constantinople is on the Mediterranean and Black Sea on the Bosphorus. But also they were in full contact with Scandinavian peoples,
right?
Germanic peoples, Norse, Vikings, or whatever you want to call them. The secret service for the Byzantine emperor was called the Varangian Guard, and they were all Vikings. They were mercenaries who were hired, like massive Viking men who were being hired to come protect the emperor, which is very common back then, right? You'd have eunuchs or mercenaries because these people had no agenda, right? They don't care about your local political stuff. They're like, just pay me. And so in the Hagia Sophia, in Constantinople, in Istanbul today, you can see runes carved on the walls of the Hagia Sophia on the outside because there were Scandinavian, German Vikings in Constantinople. And so look, if we accept as a fact that they had been to America, what are the chances if they're in contact with the Byzantine Roman people that the Byzantines would have also been to America? I mean, it's almost a certainty in my opinion.
So Augustine, he's remembered as a Moor,
right?
Even now that, like, I don't know if the timeline on that is like, Moorish people,
the same
like as we remember them, but he's remembered as a Berber or a Moor. So right there you have a rabbit hole to all the
Yeah.
Moorish presence in Florida. I mean, the oldest city in North America is named after what some people call a Moor, but also talking about the language,
Right.
talking about the Bible in Byzantium and the split between Romes. There's also the angle that Greek was the original. There's a theory that Greek was the original Bible.
Yeah.
It got freebased into Hebrew by wandering people.
Right.
Yes.
But there's a lot to show for that. In fact, if you're looking at the Greek linguistics in North America, it's almost always words that Hebrews and Greeks had in common. Because anytime the Jews of the Old Testament didn't have a word, they would just borrow one from the ancient Greek. Okeanos being one of the chiefest examples, is that the Hebrews, here's another one. Who's the real seafarers? Apparently Hebrews don't even have a word for ocean.
Wow.
They have a couple that work for that, term. And I don't speak Hebrew, so I'm probably wrong. But if I know this, that in ancient Hebrew or biblical Hebrew, they used the Greek word for ocean. So this is very common in Hebrew. They just don't have a word for something. They just borrow the ancient Greek. Okeanos being an example. Oki is the same root that you're going to find in Old Biblical Hebrew. They say Oki, the Greek word. And we were talking before we went live about there's lakes like Okeechobee in Florida, Okefenokee Swamp up in Georgia, or I think in Georgia. There's Okies all over the place. And that's a Native American word. Like Shane said, the natives that ended up becoming the Florida Indians that we know today, the Seminoles, they were Creek, parts of Creek, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee speaking, lots of different groups that ended up becoming the Seminoles. And I've done a lot of videos talking about the Hebrew in their language, but also the Greek. And, what are the odds that the Greeks came over and the Israelites came over and we don't remember anything about them, but both their languages are still present? If anything.
No, that's the evidence right there.
If anything, that was one group of people who was more, when those two languages were tied close together, that's when the people in America are present in America.
And I really love in your work too, because what you've been showing is there is like the structured cavity effect bringing them back here. Like how many many Hebrew people, Jewish people have like literally there's more Jewish people here than in Israel.
I don't know. Sometimes some metrics like that, yeah.
But what I'm saying is like the concentration, it just makes sense. It's like birds of a feather flock together. It's like the movement of schools of fish. That all makes a lot of sense to me. And there's still a tremendous amount of Greek people here also.
Yeah. So the Greeks were one of the earliest ethnic groups in North America. I mean, because you had English, French, Spanish, almost exclusively for a long time, maybe some Dutch and some other stuff. But it was the largest, this was the largest ever colonization attempt in both the Americas. So we're talking 1,500 people at once in a single go. That was at New Smyrna, Florida, 1763, 1765. 10 years before America, pretty much becomes what we know today. And also, Florida stayed British Florida was British for a short amount of time. And that was when the revolution kicked off. So, and there was more Greeks in British Florida than there were English actually living there. You know what I mean? There was 1,500 Greeks. And I say Greeks, they're culturally Greek, kind of, especially if you go back in time. But the Menorcans, it's an island off Spain. Everyone knows Majorca. It's where you go party, right? But Minorca is the smaller, major, minor, bigger island, smaller island. All these people from Minorca got recruited by the Scottish. They were British, but they were mainly Scottish overseers and Scottish like traders and Scottish merchants. Scottish merchants, right?
That's funny. That's hilarious.
And those are the people who chose what ethnic group they were going to people this colony with. They didn't people it with English. Why, if you're an English colony, why don't you want it filled with English people?
Right.
But they knew that they say that the English, their like their constitution like didn't match, you know,
Right.
with the tropics.
Right.
They said that the Greeks matched up,
Mhm.
that the people from the south of Spain and the Mediterranean, that they would be suited for the climate here.
Right.
That it's very, very similar. So they get all these Greeks, but they're Ottoman subjects. So they kind of smuggled them out of Ottoman rule.
Mhm.
So a lot of them from Greece, a lot of them from Turkey,
Mhm.
a lot of them from Minorca. And then also the overseer's wife was a like noblewoman in Ottoman Turkey, or Izmir,
Right.
in Smyrna. So they named New Smyrna after his wife's birthplace.
Oh,
She was
cool.
born in Smyrna,
Mhm.
Turkey. Right. That's where we get New Smyrna, we're told. But there's all these ancient ruins, like I said. So who knows?
Was this at the time that Spain was essentially being overrun by the Moors? Like, was that the big push that was occurring?
That was late 1400s,
Okay.
1500s.
Okay.
And, you know, yes, that conflict was still going on, because by the time you get to the 1760s, we're talking about the almost like the golden age of piracy.
Mhm.
So these people who were merchants, Moorish traders, Jewish traders, who'd been expelled from Europe, not all of them found a comfortable home in Africa or the Levant. Many of them just stayed in the coasts of Europe in pirate ships, you know, became pirates.
Right.
So the Berber pirates, the Moorish pirates, the Berber pirates. I mean, that was like America's first big role. Was once we had our independence, we had to go quell piracy in the Mediterranean, you know, from the late 1700s to like the 18,
Right.
before the Civil War. That was all fighting piracy, you know? And that also coincides with the Indian Wars in America. It coincides with the Mormon Wars, you know, early 1800s, mid 1800s. So
It's amazing with so much killing that was
Yeah.
going on.
The Moors, which in his work, he would always talk about how the Moors leaving Spain almost exactly coincides with Columbus
Right.
setting sail, and that he sort of theorized that maybe they weren't just going out in search of something, but they were chasing something, and that they were following the Moors to basically, you know, whatever their backup plan was, or to basically hunt them to extinction, or whatever the theory was. And what's interesting is that in the Byzantine stuff basically merges at the exact same time,
Right.
because 1453 you have the fall of Constantinople, which again, these things are all within, you know, years of each other, and we're within at least, you know, 2 or 3 decades of each other, and which back then was like, you know, right next to each other basically. Things didn't move that fast. And with the fall of Constantinople, all of a sudden, the Christian world is entirely separated from the Orient, because there's now a Muslim blockade in the Turks. And all of a sudden, the Middle East and India and China are no longer direct trade routes, I guess you'd say, because the Silk Road used to have traders go up and down all through Asia, getting all the spices, all the goods, teas, salts, and bring it straight to Constantinople. And then everyone from Europe can just go right there and buy it and go back. But basically, just to wrap that up, is once the Constantinople is overrun, then all of a sudden you can't get those things anymore directly. Right. So they start sailing around the world saying, how the hell can we get there? They start sailing around Africa, sailing all, you know, this way and that way, whatever they can do, you know, because you think, well, you know, because if you don't know that sort of history, the Byzantine aspect to it. You're like, well, why would someone go sail around Africa? Why wouldn't you just walk across, or horse across Europe to India? Why would you sail? And that's why. It's because there's basically the Turkish world completely cut off the European Christian world. And this is all happening at the same time as the Moors. So it all seems to be sparking like that age of exploration and stuff.
Well, also, just real quick, the kicker on this, bringing it back to Florida, is that the Gulf Stream essentially is the Silk Road of the Atlantic.
Yes.
Right. And where did the Greeks choose? Where did the Scottish choose to put the Greeks? Right where the Gulf Stream makes its turn across the Atlantic. That's why St. Augustine is what it is. It's the last spot where the Gulf Stream hugs the coastline before it goes off across the Atlantic. So that's like your last stop before, before no going back, right? New Smyrna's right there too. So if this Greek presence goes back older than the 1700s, you could be talking about the original transatlantic trade route, which might have been presided over by the Moors before the Spanish got their hands on it.
Sure.
Before the Moors, could have been, or Venetians, it could have been Italian Mediterranean seafarers. Columbus seemed to have known where he was going. Kind of. Yeah. You could trace it back more and more. You could get to the Phoenicians.
Yeah. Right.
The linguistics kind of point to this, like at some point a Hebrew and a Greek presence in the Americas. The Mormons are doing their best to tackle that mystery, and they got quelled in the 1800s too.
Yes.
Also, we know that in Roman art and old Greek art, there seems to be sometimes American fruit, American produce.
Right.
There's a Roman mosaic or, whatever they call this type of artwork. There's a pineapple. It's a clear as day pineapple. There's also things like aloe and corn, things like that on Rosslyn Chapel.
I actually saw that at Rosslyn Chapel.
Right. And is that England or Scotland?
Scotland.
Okay. So there we go. Scottish, Scottish presence in the Americas. American plants, American produce being carved into Rosslyn Chapel, which is considered like the Templar master key. It's like the codex, like everything else you can like learn just from contemplating the chapel.
I did that tour of like trying to find my Knights Templar roots. I went to Rosslyn Chapel, and then I went to Almacegem, Portugal. And in Portugal, like that area of Portugal, they had all the strongholds of the Templars there for quite a while. It was pretty unique experience. Have you looked into Cuba at all? Because Cuba seems to be the star, if the crescent with the star with the Islam flag. Cuba seems to be like a very, very special spot, especially if you're talking about, having these Caribbean
Go ahead.
No, the Caribbean pirates, the whole thing of trading and bringing all the goods, all these fruits, all these things from Central and South America back to Europe. It would just make sense that Cuba would be like the.
Yeah. Well, I like to have a little fun with Noah's Ark story.
Yes.
The Muslim account of Noah's Ark story. The Muslims always get like, the Quran gets like very specific with certain things. Like they add extra details to the Christian account to kind of make it seem more convincing.
Right.
That's my Christian angle on it. But the Noah's Ark story, according to the Quran, I believe, or at least the general Muslim position, is that the Quran started in the Middle East, ended in the Middle East, but it started close enough to the Kaaba to where it circled the Kaaba when the floodwaters were coming in, apparently. And this is maybe even be why they circle the Kaaba today, or, but they say that the Ark circled the Kaaba 3 times. Now, if that could just be made up, I don't know. But a lot of people believe it. We're talking millions and millions of people. you can't really circle something that's underwater.
Right.
But if the Kaaba, no, roll with me here. This is as big of a stretch as you'll ever see, but we can dig into it. If the Kaaba was Cuba,
Right.
and the Ark left the Gulf of Mexico,
Yes.
it theoretically would have to wrap around Cuba at least once.
Mhm.
And if we're talking about a toilet bowl effect, floodwaters, Cuba is one of the last peaks sticking out of the ocean. The Ark could circle Cuba a couple times.
Yeah.
And what's so significant about what's in the Kaaba? They say it came from the heavens. Oh, you mean one of the last remnants of the sky before the earth flooded or something like that? You know, some pre-flood artifact, some meteorite that caused a great change here on Earth. They seem to think that it's asteroid, meteorite in origin, right? That it's that the stone, the black stone, concealed within.
Yeah.
There's a lot of meteorite deposits in the Caribbean, around Cuba, around Haiti. That's one of the reasons Haiti is so prized to certain investors, you know, that like to keep it in shambles and mudslides and right to keep it ripe for mineral harvesting. They know how much asteroids. Yeah,
Right.
There's iridium. There's what do they call this? The green one that comes from the sky too. Like moldavite. I think there's moldavite down there too.
Yeah.
They find some of the rarest minerals down near Cuba, Puerto Rico. So I don't have all my notes here, but on my channel, we've talked about the link between Kaaba and Cuba. Now that sounds ridiculous until you look at all the Confederate symbolism.
It doesn't seem ridiculous.
Exactly. But if you're hearing it for the first time, it might sound ridiculous.
Yeah.
But what if that little thing in Mecca is so important because it's just a little piece of what they had going on in the Americas? It's just a theory. I wouldn't rest my channel on it. But that's all I can think of when I think of
I think of
Cuba.
the Bermuda Triangle right away.
Yes.
As well. Like as far as it links Florida and Cuba and all
Definitely.
that kind of stuff, you know? I mean,
all the Indians went to Cuba too, by the way. All the actual Florida Indians, like South Florida Indians, all the surviving ones, they were evacuated to Cuba.
I didn't know that.
By the Spanish before the British period. So 1760s is when all the original Florida Indians, peninsular Florida.
Right.
The Seminoles have some of that DNA too, some of that genetics, you know, some of their families from Florida too. But they're kind of mainly from the north, the border of Florida. The border that Florida has with Georgia and Alabama. Seminoles come from there. So they're technically Florida Indians, but the real like peninsular Florida Indians, they disappeared. They went extinct. They got shipped off Cuba.
Well, what poetic justice. Like you have the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s, and then you have this influx of probably, you know, their lineage where they were original Floridian, even though they were, you know, generations and generations being called Cuban.
Makes me think of the Bay of Pigs too.
Yeah.
Because they trained those guys here in Florida.
Uh-huh.
While we were talking, I looked up something that kind of ties in a lot of this together. In the letters to early Christian churches, or in Revelation, I guess, Smyrna is named in the Bible as one of the churches of the, I forget what they say, of the apocalypse or of Revelation. Like
it's melted.
7 major churches.
Yeah.
It's like it's obliterated.
Yeah, it should also be noted too when we're talking about St. Augustine. What is St. Augustine's not his most famous book? His most famous book is the Confessions, St. Augustine, but his sort of magnum opus, we're talking about the man St. Augustine, is a book called The City of God. And then obviously we have, you know, the first city in the Americas is the City of God. You know, it is named after St. Augustine. There's no coincidence there, I don't think.
Before I got into any of this, like Old World Florida, when I was like 10 years ago, or 2015, when I was just watching YouTube conspiracy theories, I remember watching a lot of like Alex Jones tier, like Apocalypse, Doomsday, like who's going to trigger World War III? You know,
they're coming for you.
Pretty much. And I remember being on this like wavelength for a little time that Turkey was going to be the instigator of World War III. And I didn't know exactly why, but I was watching a lot of this content. Now I know it's because in Revelation, all 7 of the churches
We're all in Turkey.
They're
are in
Byzantine.
Turkey.
They're Byzantine churches. They're Orthodox Christian.
And them being kind of the crux between like the Christian and the Muslim world. You can kind of see why that's relevant to like prophesizing Revelation today.
Yeah.
They really are like kicking the ball back and forth.
They're always right.
Definitely.
Turkey as a nation is always playing both sides.
So we've got in the book of Revelation, Ephesus, Sardis, I don't know how to say these, Laodicea,
I don't know.
Laodicea, I don't know, on the Lycus, Smyrna, Philadelphia, Thyatira, and Pergamum. So 7 churches named in Revelation. You know what else this makes me think of? Do you know what else Smyrna is famous for that I haven't worked in, that I haven't covered yet at all on my channel?
No.
Is it Sabbatai Zevi? How do you say his name?
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
Sabbatai
Sabbatai
Zevi. Sabbatai Zevi. Ottoman Jewish mystic and ordained rabbi from Smyrna. His family origins may have been Ashkenazi or Sephardi, active throughout the Ottoman Empire. Zevi claimed to be the long-awaited Jewish Messiah and founded the Sabbatean movement. Central to his teachings was the belief that during the Messianic age, acts traditionally considered sinful would transform into righteous ones. The Antinomian. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know the premise though of his stuff. It's basically like
this doctrine led Zevi and his followers to deliberately violate Jewish commandments, and a controversial practice that later inspired movements like the Frankists.
It was basically an upside down philosophy saying, okay, if because they're Jewish, that they're not considering Jesus as a legitimate like savior, and so they're saying, at least he's saying, oh, well, if a Messiah is coming to relinquish our sins and sort of save us, well, then the more we sin, the faster he's going to come. And so that was literally the philosophy. And people were like, oh, great. Count me in, And and honestly, that still inspires people today, I think.
It sounds like modern day Israel.
Right. There you go.
Let's go.
No, they do. Yeah, they're trying to trigger prophecy. Like force it.
Absolutely.
Of course, Robert Sepper is probably where most people know this guy from. He's done some good videos on him. He has a book on it, 1666, Redemption Through Sin.
Yep.
Not a good book. Pretty small. I think there's some repeated paragraphs in there. Come on, Rob, you can do better than that. But the information's pretty good.
Yeah.
1666, Redemption Through Sin.
We carry it here.
And yes.
So we're not knocking on it too hard, but
it's a small book.
Could be better. Yeah.
And Rasputin apparently was known to preach something similar. They call them the Klists. So like how they say it? Klist. I think they call it Klist.
Interesting.
Someone in the chat tell me, is it the Klist? Rasputin was part of a group that was like, it was like pagan folk traditions mixed with like Orthodox Christianity.
And they have no idea where he came from, by the way.
Yeah.
Like if you look up Rasputin, they're like, he just showed up one day. They don't know like where he's from, who his family was, anything about him. He just like completely materialized one day. It's very bizarre.
He was the Russian mystic, right?
Yeah. He was like a.
But you see, that's kind of
work for the czars.
What's the common thread between Rasputin in Russia and Sabbatai Zevi in Smyrna? Byzantines.
Yes.
Right. I mean, how far did they extend into Russia?
I mean,
I think
pretty far.
Yeah.
Technically, Russia.
The major cities, probably.
Yeah, Russia is like its own thing.
Yeah.
But religiously, right, because that's how Rome works too, right? People say, "Oh, well, Rome never conquered Ireland." It's like, really? They're all Catholic. So, right. So they did conquer them.
Yes.
They just didn't do it, the old way.
Right.
But they're conniving, right? And they conquered many other nations as well. And the Eastern Church is no different. So people will say, oh, well, Russia is not part of the Byzantine Empire. It's not Roman. And it's like, okay, sure, keep telling yourself that they're Eastern Orthodox Christian, and they've been members of the church. And yes, there are regional churches, like they're within the Orthodox Church. It's not like there's like the Catholic Church. It's not one large thing. They have various patriarchs and things like that. But the Russian Orthodox Church is stemming off of the Greek Orthodox Church, and the Greek history from Byzantium, and they're adhering to councils and all this kind of stuff from Byzantium, from Constantinople. So the Russians are, in that way, religiously Roman too.
There is a very interesting connection with like with the Greeks and the Russians in general. I've been listening to this woman. Oh God, I wish I remember her channel. Where she's actually she's pointing to the original Greece wasn't in the Mediterranean.
Yep.
It was actually off the coast of Russia, up near the what's the Bering? I think it's the Bering Straits.
Oh no, the Bosphorus.
Yeah.
Where are you talking about in Alaska?
Yeah, like near Alaska.
That's the Bering Straits.
Yeah. She's bringing up all these like relics that they're finding in, I guess, I mean, that area of the world, you could call it east or west, because it's like right on the line that delineates east to west, which to me is kind of interesting, especially if you're going to look at the Bible originally being at least like the Septuagint, being the original Greek writing of that. And then you have the Hebrews, making their version of it, and then having it written in Aramaic. But that whole notion, because whenever I've interacted with Greeks and Russians, and they're very similar. Yeah. Like just in my conditioning down here, like you go down to
even I know
use the alphabets.
I was going to say, he always goes to the words and things like that. The Russian alphabet is Cyrillic. And so it's Greek. It's Greek letters. And even the name, the Cyrillic alphabet, comes from Saint Cyril or Cyril. I don't know how you pronounce that.
So were the Greeks just Southern Russians?
No, they're ethnically different. But like I said, it's just like what you see in the Roman Empire that we think of. They are able to culturally conquer people, right? Like the Roman Empire is able to have people in Ireland who resisted Rome for hundreds and hundreds of years, finally through ideas and through alphabets, languages, things like that, slowly get their tentacles in there. And all of a sudden you have Irish people giving math, Catholic mass in Latin. And it's like, oh, like they got you.
You're
it's the same thing in Russia. Like, yes, they're ethnically different, of course. They're not that far from like Eastern European people, but in many ways, they import the Cyrillic alphabet, which is a Byzantine, Bulgarian kind of Eastern European script from an Eastern Orthodox saint who, standardized it into Russia. And then, the iconography, all these kinds of things, they're very much Greek, culturally. Spangler, we talked about before, Oswald Spangler, he said, and actually Rudolf Steiner agrees with him on this, that the Russian age is far off in the future. That according to Spangler, the Russian people don't have a culture yet. Their culture is a hodgepodge of European cultures, German, French, all this kind of stuff. And obviously, right, we're saying they don't even have their own alphabet, things like that. And so they're very much in their early stages. Nothing wrong with that. It's just, they're a different kind of timeline. And Spangler believed in the future that they would develop, organically, authentically develop a Russian culture that was wholly their own. It was in some way like a perfect expression of their unique like world feeling of being a Russian. And Steiner, Rudolf Steiner, completely corroborates that. He says that the next age after the sort of American age will be a Slavic age. So the Slavs and the Russians will be the primary power.
God, that
on Earth.
totally
Yeah.
fits the economics of like the BRICS. Like
Yeah,
when you
right,
look at
yeah.
the, you know,
Yeah,
that totally fits that. That's pretty amazing. I didn't know.
yeah. Well, Steiner and Spengler writing this, you know, in the World War I era, or maybe the 20s at the latest. And so we're talking pre-World War II.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, so like the fact that they could predict these geopolitical movements is crazy.
The root race kind of theory behind that is that there's the larger Aryan root race, but within that you have Germanic, Slavic, etc. And that Germanic has been dominating the last 1,000 years. You know, you can't really deny that.
Mhm.
Even the French and Spanish are Germanic. Like you might, you know, people don't like to say that.
Yeah.
But French, Germanic,
They're Franks. Yeah.
so Spanish, everything West Europe has been dominating. And again, you could say, well, we're just kind of we're skewing our perception. We're just using our own magnifying glass. But you just look at when Germanic people and Slavic people came into contact. Last 1,000 years, the Germanic were almost always dominating to the point where the Slavs, of course, that's where we get the word
slave.
Right. Whereas now the tides are kind of turning, and you see families like the Trumps who are making a seemingly clear decision to wed and branch their family with Slavs, with Slovenian, you know, some of the tallest people in the world. I think height is a good indicator of like spiritual aptitude and patience and like, you know, foresightedness and, you know.
Yeah.
Baron Trump, by the way, speaks Slovenian.
Yeah.
I believe they have their own dialect. Yeah.
Wow.
And so he does not just speak English.
Yeah.
And supposedly, this is a rumor, but supposedly he even has a slight accent because he spoke with his mother, spent mostly time with his mother and spoke Slovenian with her. That even till this day, he has a little sort of hint of an accent. Like with the sort of Slavic future is very
Estonia
possible,
just broke away from. Did you guys see that yesterday?
No.
Estonia's money broke away. They went.
Way.
They went completely out of the central banking system.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just want to say real quick, we're not going to be bending the knee to any fucking Slavs. Okay, we're not talking anytime soon here.
Yeah.
And by the way,
we are hyping them up for people. I don't think you're Slavic, but I don't think we're not Slavic, so we're hyping them up for non-Slavic people.
Yeah, this is Rudolf Steiner has been wrong on about a million things.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So we're not putting all our eggs in this basket, but you can.
He's also talking about like 1,000 years from now too.
You can also interpret this as the Slavs, who have been historically kind of muddied up with Asiatic DNA, potentially stepping into a more, just kind of becoming more and more European. You could look at it that way too, is that the Slavs are coming up instead of the Germans, Germanic going down. But there is some writing on the wall a little bit, like with, you know, the Russia of today, believe it or not, like all the ethnic cleansing in Russia, might have worked out for the better. You know?
Yeah.
You know, who knows?
But it's just young. Like what I was taught in economics is that banks move money to where there's young people, and the average age in the United States is over 51. The average age in Russia is over 26.
Yeah.
So it's almost half the age. It's a totally, in banks, the money wants to move it to where there's people that don't have a sense of entitlement yet. And usually younger people are hungrier.
You asked about potentially like Russians and Greeks having a common lineage. There is something to that, because who settled Russia? Where do they get their name from? The Rus, the Vikings, right? Ukraine, also settled by the Rus. You know, Kiev, I believe, was one of their strong points back then.
It was the capital of the Russian Empire for hundreds of years.
And like Shane's saying, the Varangian Guard too. You know, if you want to have some real fun and start stretching Merovingian guard.
Right.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
whatever. But if you look at the Norse origins of the Russians, you can also start looking at the Norse origins of the Etruscans.
Right.
Mm.
Et Rus Khan.
Mhm.
Et Rus Khan. And you
Mhm.
can take that Rus out of there and say it's the same people as the Rus, the red people, Russia.
Mhm.
Well, the Etruscans painted themselves red, painted themselves head to toe red.
Mhm.
Why? Because half of them, starting off, most of them, later on, less and less of them, were fair-haired and fair-skinned. And they're living in the Mediterranean. It's hot.
Right.
They're not adjusted to that. They would use pretty much sunscreen, red ochre, to be out in the sun all day. And you see this that they started mixing with a more indigenous people, and over time they just became Mediterraneans. But on their earliest artwork, they're clearly fair-haired Nordic people. I mean, they go as far as they make their own busts of themselves. I mean, the frontal lobe, it's like these are Nordic people. The Mediterraneans do not look like that. They have a high nasal passage. Everything about them's anatomically Nordic. What we consider Nordic people. They actually look like SS propaganda.
Nice.
These old Etruscan busts of people. Very we're talking older than Rome, and this is still preserved with the blonde hair and everything.
Are you guys of the mind that the Etruscans were the original worldwide seafaring peoples?
No, I would say that there's a rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
The Etruscans is what tied the Mediterranean people to the Finns.
Okay.
And to me, the Finland is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Finland is the grand finale. It's the finial. It's the tippy top of the pyramid.
Right.
It's the finish line, the finale. It's how you define any word. Go to Finland, because you don't want to be a deaf Phoenician. You want to go find the deaf Finnish.
Yes.
The Finnish meaning of the word is
Right.
the real definition.
Mm-hmm.
Finland, their mythology goes hand in hand with the Etruscan mythology. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The Etruscans had a mythology that was very similar to the Kalevala, the principal epic of the Finnish people.
Mm.
And everything down to some of the animals that the Etruscans had that probably didn't originate on the islands that we see them on.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them could have been Norse. We're talking big bulls and things like that, and the Minoans are right here alongside them, kind of maybe a little before too. But the Minoans, the Etruscans, we know they looked Norse. What really does it is their language, their writing system. They might have came before Phoenician or something, but they have pretty much a Phoenician script, looks like a Phoenician script. And you have so many letters in common with the Norse runes. Okay, and Phoenician would be called Punic if it's being used in North Africa. Punic.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the Vikings, the Norse, using runes. Who's the real seafarers? Who had the real strong wood to make all the boats? We look at the Phoenician homeland. It's this tiny little strip of land. You're telling me those people took over the entire Mediterranean and had enough manpower to man the forts and keep everyone in check?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about that. These people were very bearded too. They had knowledge of the stars.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the only people in the ancient world who could cross the open seas at night? The Vikings, the Phoenicians. The Greeks were like kids playing in a kiddie pool.
Right.
The Phoenicians were like, oh, okay, yeah, he keeps splashing around over there. Yeah, oh, yeah, look, there's some, they got some nice ivory over there. We're going to be over in the deep end, doing real business, doing real global commerce. The Greeks were warring over a couple of rocky islands, The Phoenicians, they had their sights set far and far, and they were reading the stars. That's what made them so unique. The Phoenicians were seafarers, not because they had better boats, or they did have better boats, but because they could read the stars
Right.
with the naked eye. You know, they had good instruments too, but they knew the stars. And how do you know the stars? How do you know the stars really well? You're not going to do it in Greece.
No.
You're going to do it at the North Pole,
Right.
Yeah.
where you have complete unobstructed view
Yes.
of the stars over the northern hemisphere.
Mhm.
Where do you get your swastikas? All over Etruscan, and every culture, but all over Etruscan artwork.
Mhm.
They're some of the most swastika laden,
Definitely.
people from the Norse.
Right.
I think so. And I think that they are the link between the Phoenicians and the Norse
Yeah.
seafarers.
One not even that far out there rabbit hole to go down in terms of that, the Mediterranean Norse connection, sort of like
Mhm.
around Europe thing is Homer and the Trojan Wars,
Mhm.
because there is pretty good evidence. Yeah, this is not even that. This is not like conspiracy stuff. I think most stuff he was just talking about too is pretty like straightforward, factual.
Mhm.
And if you look into the Iliad, look into the Odyssey and the Trojan Wars, there are anomalies all the way through. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's somewhat of a common theory that the Homeric epics and the Trojan Wars were set in Finland, definitely in Finland,
The British
potentially,
Isles,
in Germany,
Iceland.
islands off of Denmark,
Yeah.
things along those lines. And there are, there's geographic cues to that.
Mhm.
I don't have this all off the top of my head, like all
Yeah.
the little things, but please look into it because it's crazy. It's very likely that the Trojan Wars were actually fought, or myths that have been handed down from Scandinavia. There's snow.
Yeah.
There's snow in the Iliad
Yeah.
on people's shields.
Yeah.
That on Odysseus's way home, he's stopping on islands that people claim are off of Denmark and Germany and things like that.
Yeah.
I believe that one of the other claims, if I remember correctly, is that they fought at nighttime. And I think people claim that it was either because of the longer daylight hours in Scandinavia, or even potentially the Northern Lights, things like that. So there's small things that tend to, even in like a translation today, possibly cue into these Mediterranean, Minoan, early Greek type of people were potentially offshoots of Germanic peoples.
And isn't it funny in the movie Troy they cast Brad Pitt?
It's all
There you go.
No, it's all. No, this is something that I've always talked about. The people, they've always chosen Anglo-Saxon, Celtic people to play the Greek gods and the Greek heroes. Brad Pitt, Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
He's
Peter
Zeus.
O'Toole.
Peter O'Toole.
is in
Irish.
Troy. Yeah.
It's always been the Irish. Even right now, Paul Mescal in the new Gladiator movie, he's Irish.
Yeah.
You don't find that ancient Greek
No.
nose that Liam Neeson,
Yeah.
has.
Eric Bana kind of has
Or-
the like a longer face as well, longer nose.
Paddy
Brown.
Pimblett in the UFC. I think he's English, but you see this ancient bust type profile. You don't see it in Greece too much anymore. You see it in people that Hollywood casts for the Greek roles and whatever. The Greyhound. Here's a good one. It's the only dog named in the Bible, and it's one of the oldest dogs known to man. Where is it unique to? The Levant and the Eastern Mediterranean and the British Isles.
Wow.
The Greyhound.
Mhm.
And Greek epics too.
Yeah.
They talk about, greyhounds. That's a good one right there.
And another link to Florida. All the Greyhound racing here. That's kind of interesting.
True.
Yeah.
I think the Greyhound's the only dog named in the Bible.
Very Italian.
The Greyhound, only dog breed named in the Bible. It's very Italian, but you see that's the culture is largely from the British Isles of Greyhound.
Interesting.
And that's one of the big links between the Greeks, the Bible, that biblical events and Greek, myths, stories, epics come from. Also, the bouzouki, the instruments that are unique to the Scottish and Irish and the Greeks. Let's look at St. Andrew. He's a principal saint of the Greeks and Scotland. Also, you have George, too, for the Greeks and the British. For English, George is the principal saint. You also, and the notes and the meters of the music. I have my Hidden Greek History of America video goes into a lot of this. It ends with this, so a lot of people don't get to the end. But the Scottish and Irish are playing the bouzouki, which is like a Greek style instrument, pipes even. The Scottish have the perfected art of keeping the pipes perpetual blowing. But if you just take away the bag, you're talking about a Middle Eastern, Levantine instrument, the allos, the Greek, the two pipes at once. That's the principal.
Hands playing, yeah.
That's the principal instrument of ancient Greek. The poems and all the stories would all be set to either allos, the two pipes, or a lyre. Everyone had a harp back then. But the bouzouki is a good link to this today, and even the colors of the flags between Scotland and Greece. The blue and the white. Right. Mykonos, Macedonian, Maccabees. They're Greek names with Mac or Mick at the beginning. All over the place. There's something to that. Jesus, born in Bethlehem, right? But from his family, Galilee. Galilee. Yeah. Why were they so ethnically different from the people around them in that area? That was a Phoenician colony at one point. And the Phoenicians link the British Isles to the Levant. They are the link between the British Isles and the Levant. Tyre, principal city of the Phoenicians. Also a Germanic god. Mars, Tyr, Tuesday. And the rune for Tyr in both those cultures, the T rune is the planet Mars. Both cultures. So you could go on and on. Celtic link to the Greeks, or the Finnish link to and the Celts are the Finns, by the way, which the Celts are the Finns who mixed a little bit with Black and Native American people. The Finns are the original Aryan people who mixed a little bit with Asian people instead. So the Finns have pin straight blonde hair. That's what happens when the Asian gene mixes with the Aryan gene. Neutralizes the red hair, neutralizes the curly hair. You get pin straight blonde hair. If your original Aryan culture mixed with a little bit of Native American or African DNA, you get the curly red hair. Look at all the NBA, mixed race NBA players, curly red hair. There's something to this, that Helvetic, Hellenic, and the principal deity of the Phoenicians was El, right? El. So it was Elohim even. Whatever. You go on and on, just ranting.
It's, for me, what would be the actual point in moving the stories from what you're saying of like Northern Scandinavia, Northern Europe, and actually moving it and making the essentially the center of the biblical story in Jerusalem or the Middle East? Like, what from your opinion, like what is that just like you were saying how masterful the Romans were in actually slowly but surely working their way through religion.
I cannot tell you how many people will say that Ireland, they're so proud. Ireland's never conquered by Rome. Caesar got to the English Channel and he turned back, right? And it's like, yes, that is true. And there's something there, but they got him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what if...
And others, too.
What if... Have you heard of the theory that it's the Irish Catholic Church?
Right, yeah. And they call themselves Irish Catholic instead of Roman Catholic. Yeah.
But that the Irish came first.
I have not heard that they came first.
The Celtic cross was...
I heard that from Michael Tsarian back in the day.
Yeah. Michael Tsarian is drawing from the Conor MacDarry vein.
Okay.
And also Wilson Alan Wilson, Blackett, I forget that guy's first name, and Ross Broadstock, R.I.P. Ross Broadstock.
Mm.
You want to talk about some piping hot gravy?
Please.
Okay, now I don't know how well Ross Broadstock took care of himself. If his heart was, I don't know. I would hate to like theorize about a natural death, but considering what he talked about and how he died, I mean, I think we're over target here.
I don't know anything about him.
So Ross Broadstock was an author. I don't know what his profession was, but he was friends with a lot of these authors who are doing that, like Michael Sari and Connor McDarry. The Irish started everything,
right?
That kind of angle, and he was saying that biblical Hebrew is Irish or Welsh.
Right.
I'm wrong. I can't remember the details. Forgive me. But he said Egyptian hieroglyphics was the pictographic version of Welsh.
Right.
So Welsh and Egyptian, I know that for sure. And if you go to Native Americans like the Micmac, who have seemingly Egyptian characters, they even say, "Oh yeah, we met with the Welsh, we met with the Finns, we met with the Irish," and they have seemingly Egyptian hieroglyphics in New England, in Canada.
All the way up in the Mississippi too.
And we call them Micmac. You know what I mean? Like Irish,
right.
Irish, Scottish, right? Micmac. And you can the name, the real pronunciation, I don't know too well.
Yeah.
But they were saying, fuck, what was I talking about?
You were saying Ross Broadstock.
Broadstock.
Hebrew and Welsh and all the stuff.
He taught that a lot of that Troy in the British Isles, or at least the Trojan War, they talk about that. But he's mainly coming from the biblical point of view.
Okay.
Where he's saying everything kind of comes from the Welsh. Like that's why the Jews went back to Scotland. That's why there's such a Jewish presence in Scotland. That's why the Irish are the most anti-Semitic. Scotland is the most pro-Semitic place in the world. Ireland's the most anti-Semitic place in the world to this day. Right. They agree on so much, but that. This kind of explains that Ross Broadstock died on a live stream. He was live talking about hidden Welsh, hidden British, origins of the Bible. He got a heart attack on live stream.
Yeah.
With his
like
kids,
2 years ago.
his kids like around him. Just normal live stream, like he did, once a week or whatever. Dies.
That's nuts.
He had some pain. He was like, "Oh, guys." He's like, "Whoa," and he almost passed out. He's like, "I got to sign off." Signs off. The next thing we hear is his kids wrote a message saying, "Yeah, sorry guys, our dad passed away."
Wow.
That's wild.
And he was, like deep in all this research. Some people theorize. Again, I don't know if he had heart issues or not, but I know that heart attack guns exist. That heart attack rays exist. That's not out of the question.
So this is weird because this is kind of poppy. Have you heard about the show about Wrexham, the professional soccer team that was bought by Ryan Reynolds and what's the other actors?
Rob McElhenney.
Yeah.
Rob McElhenney.
Rob McElhenney. Yeah.
Something like that.
They bought this, downtrodden professional soccer team, and now they've brought it up to where it's in I think the third or fourth highest league now in professional soccer. But the whole show's set in Welsh country, in Wrexham.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what I always noticed in that is the double dragon,
right, the logo,
on their flag.
Yeah.
The red dragon.
Right.
Yeah.
That symbology to me is like very,
sure.
origins, like, something of like just like almost makes me think of the city of London's flag. Their heraldry is very much dragon oriented also.
Sure.
So I'm wondering if there's like that link between the two.
Yeah, it makes me think of alchemy as well. A red dragon is very much an alchemical symbol. The dragon, I was actually explaining this to him the other day. The dragon itself is actually supposed to be a coincidentia positorum, which is like a union of opposites in alchemy, because that's what alchemy is basically all about. You have the serpent, which is the most like earthbound creature,
always on its
literally stuck on the ground. Unless it's climbing a tree or something, but you get the idea. And then they put wings on it, which is like the least earthbound. It's polar opposite, and it creates this dragon, which is it's a creature created out of like a dialectic, out of two opposites.
There's also the angle that the dragon and the cross are the same.
Right.
Like it's 4 corners. It's the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac.
Isn't that like the griffin? Doesn't
yes.
the griffin represent that?
So we say dragon, and I'm a little bit of a stickler on this. Okay. Yeah. The Welsh dragon, I hate to break it to people.
It's a griffin.
Not a dragon.
That's fine.
It's not a dragon. It's either a griffin, a cockatrice, or some more rooster inspired animal. Right. This is not like your. To me, a dragon drags on the ground. Drag on the ground. Right?
I never thought.
And going
of that.
back to the serpent in the Garden of Eden, this is very serpentine, right? I think that real dragons, as we remember them from like medieval Europe, are alligators and crocodiles.
That's right. I remember seeing
100% believe that. They breathe fire. They have layers. They wander into European cities and, terrorize the population. And then a brave hero would come and slay them, and they'd stuff it, and they're still there to this day. And almost every major city in Italy and Spain and all these coastal places have had saltwater crocodiles or a Nile crocodile wander in and terrorize the place until some great night. Talking about St. George, the Dragon Slayer, he's the patron saint of Scotland. No, that's Andrew. Sorry.
Yeah.
Patron saint of England, St. George, and also, of course, Georgia. On the other side, right? Georgia, and then you have whatever. The Welsh dragon, to me, it's more of the composite creature rather than an actual dragon or whatever the original dragon is. And I say alligator is a dragon because I know you like the Chinese zodiac a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What's the one sign that's not real? Or one animal that's not real?
The dragon.
The dragon.
Yeah.
Well, every single other animal on that wheel you can go pick up and handle. It's real. Why is the dragon not real? Well, guess what? We're just out of touch. In China, they know damn well their dragon is an alligator. That's the alligator. Now, there's only like 50 of them alive. It's kind of a little bit of a panda situation. They might be fake. They might be cloned, like minis.
I didn't know they had alligators.
But the Chinese have their own alligator.
They do.
And they know that's the dragon. You go to the Chinese dragon page or the Chinese alligator page, and they'll tell you that's the inspiration for the dragon.
Right? Well, why did they say you said they breathe fire? I've never seen a...
Yeah, so it's called bellowing.
Okay.
It's called bellowing.
Okay.
And when they're in coldish water, they will bellow and they'll gurgle this water and it'll steam and sizzle. So it gives the impression of burning steam.
Boiling.
They just come out of the water and it's the smoke, the steam. Use your imagination. You've never seen one of these things. It just wandered into your town.
It was scary.
If you're from Egypt, it's not that scary. If you're from Italy and you've never even seen a good drawing of one of these things, and a 15-foot one pops into your town, just starts eating people because their crocodiles are man hunters.
Yes, they are.
Alligators are not man hunters. They're docile. We were talking about that earlier. The alligator, it seems to almost be the domesticated version. Long lost domesticated feral version of the alligator.
We got caught on that thread because I was thinking of the Welsh flag.
Yeah.
Can you like complete the thought though about this gentleman that died and like why you think his bomb, like what he was putting out was such a bombshell?
He's continuing the work of these like three big kind of linguists, because Welsh is like,
It's difficult.
It's very
Strange,
nuanced.
yeah.
It's very unique. We kind of say Celtic, but like Scottish, Irish, and Welsh, they're like worlds apart sometimes. And the Welsh angle is that, yes, there's Irish in the Bible, the Middle Eastern Irish connection. Yes, the Scottish. Yes, the Welsh. His whole thing was that also J.R.R. Tolkien knew this because he took Welsh. He used Welsh just as much as he used Finnish too. That Welsh might be like a progenitor of the other languages, kind of like Finnish. It also kind of flips the script where what I'm always talking about, you're looking at the Mediterranean or the Levant is like, oh, everything comes from, the Mediterranean or the East or this, like the runes. This is just, as soon as you flip the switch, you're looking top down instead of down up. Everything comes down from the north,
right?
Which makes so much sense.
It makes so much more sense.
Mario Garza, talks about that. You guys did a good show on that. It's like it really is a trickle down, legacy,
which fits what we've been talking about the entire time with languages and American mythology and stuff. Yeah,
and I think Ross was really on the money. These other two guys, they passed away older, right? But still, I think Ross was the forefront of that movement as it is in 2024 or 20,
which
whenever
is
he died away.
Debunking out of Africa. It's debunking all kinds of stuff. That's why the bombshell is it. It sounds small, but if you start from that premise at the center, there's a lot of consequences down the line. Like in itself, it doesn't sound like a bombshell, but it's like, okay, well, if that's your starting point, and then you start to work everything else out, it sends ripples out, which become tidal waves.
So this gets back to how we started this whole talk. This line of thinking is so anti-dispensationalist.
Sure.
Because the dispensationalist movement, one, it's like everybody has to go back to the Middle East. Like everything's Middle East, and Jesus is coming again in the future, and we have to do all this stuff. And it's a futurist movement, right? And we know for a fact that was a complete social engineering
psyop, like
psyop,
100% confirmed psyop. It's not even a conspiracy theory. It was literally, it was actually a secular and Jewish movement in England which started it, and then it leads to the development of the Schofield Study Bible and the Plymouth Brethren, which Aleister Crowley was born into, by the way, which is a weird connection. With them, but it turns into American evangelism,
right?
And all of these wacky, crazy cults, more or less. And I talk about this all the time. And Carl Jung actually talked about this, which is that evangelicalism, or however you say that, is an American phenomenon. It doesn't happen it doesn't really happen in South America. Doesn't happen in Europe, right? Where are the rattlesnake wielding German people? It does not happen.
That'd be a great video.
It is a strictly American phenomenon. Yes, there's going to be some weird groups or whatever, but our weird groups are not that small. They're like movements, and it's because of the dispensationalism. It was sent into America to completely undermine authentic religion, anything to do with tradition.
What about Mormonism? It's almost kind of the opposition.
That's what I mean.
Is that
100%.
Why it was so singled out? Because all these cults or all these cults were radical or offended the others in some way.
Yes.
But the Mormons got the short end of the stick because they oriented things
the exact opposite way
to America.
That's correct.
This brings me to where I'm living now. Like I live in what the Mormons said that this is
Right.
the
Yeah.
Holy Land.
Sure.
The part of Missouri that I'm in is just south of that.
Mhm.
And wouldn't you know it, the county that Springfield, Missouri is in has the most seminaries that promote dispensationalism
It's like
and Zionism.
yeah.
They're like literally,
Yeah.
and that movement was so anchored into Missouri's history that up until like 1960, you were allowed
Wow.
to shoot a Mormon
Oh
sight
my
unseen.
God. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's unbelievable.
Like you wouldn't have been.
Yeah. And by the way, Oswald Spengler, to bring him up again randomly, he accounted for the more radical, strange Christian cults in America by saying that it was actually because of the land, that the Native American ethos was working its way
Yes.
as like a morphic resonance, as like a field, like that the native religion was based off of the land. Therefore, when you import Christianity, it will start to take on characteristics of Native American. It starts to look like a blend on the fringes of Native American Christianity.
Yeah.
These Southern people and Appalachian people and what have you are not, or even Mormon people are not necessarily thinking that, right? It's not a conscious thing. But in Spengler's opinion, and again, we're talking over 100 years ago, he's saying that the land itself
I 100%
is resonating. And that's why you see, like I said, people wielding rattlesnakes. It's like they're Native American. Right?
Yeah.
If you saw a Native American wielding rattlesnakes, nobody bats an eye.
Right.
But if you see some Appalachian guy, you're like, oh my God, like what's going on?
So earlier, we're in your store, and I'm like talking about the difference between the paramagnetic rock and the diamagnetic rock. When I lived in Costa Rica, it was paramagnetic earth, and it presents totally different in the body. Like when you're on paramagnetic earth, there's a totally different pattern that will show itself. That you take that same body,
right?
You put it over a limestone shelf, and that's diamagnetic, and that body presents differently.
Yeah.
And so I hope that I got to read Spengler.
Yeah, he's great. He accounts for a lot of these because people have some explaining to do about like what I said. Why is, and like I said, 100 years ago, Jung and Spengler and people are talking about this because they're highly intellectual, like highbrow German Europeans, and they're looking at America with their jaws on the floor, and they're just like, "What is going on?" And like I said, people have explaining to because it seems to be an American phenomenon. Why is where are the crazy cults in Canada? Where are the crazy cults in Brazil or whatever?
Yeah, you can also look at it as like an evolutionary point of view. Is that with my whole and the Mormons' body of work, looking at the Hebrew links between Native Americans and the Hebrews, you could look at it as, oh, well, it's a direct lineage to Noah or Abraham or someone. You could just look at it as the spiritual evolution of Christianity being far forward, of Hebrew, religion potentially being a step back or below Christianity, or just a step away, whatever, doesn't have to be a hierarchy. But instead of, you could just say, well, that Native American religion was already neck and neck with like Hebrew mysticism, and that Christianity, if like it gets too lazy, can just kind of like drift back into that level of animism or and the Mormons were drawing at this thread as much as they could. Joseph Smith, I believe some of the biggest speeches he ever gave were in front of thousands of Native Americans, it's not like he just showed up and like bought them out. I mean, he had to like give, orations, like,
yes,
he is talking.
He was a master con man.
Well,
yeah.
Well, when I say con man, just so you know, I don't have a negative connotation.
I am a con man.
Yeah, I mean, it's just he had charisma. Obviously, he had charisma.
He had Native Americans, like the most articulate of them, and the ones who would debate things like this with the whites at the time. He was not wiping the floor with them, but he had their jaws dropped when he was explaining his take on their kind of religion a little bit. And again, the Mormons will know this better than me, but there's paintings or pictures you can see he's giving great speeches to Native Americans.
Yeah.
And they're agreeing with him. It's not like they couldn't touch base. Like they were so close to where the Mormons were, what they were preaching, that they were willing to join in. And thousands of them did join in right away.
Yeah.
So they were some of the earliest.
In a book that I gave him as a gift called City of the Saints by Richard Burton. Richard Burton was an actor in the 50s, not that Richard Burton. This is Sir Richard Burton.
Okay.
Sir Richard Francis Burton. He was considered the most interesting man in the world. He was a famous British adventurer, explorer, the first white European man to go to Mecca undercover in blackface.
Nice.
Quite literally.
Biochar face.
Yeah, in biochar face. And then he also he visits.
Call him Gigi Allah.
That's funny. Richard Burton writes this book, City of the Saints. Not easy to get a hold of, actually. No coincidence. And he travels by horse, like wagons and whatever, those stagecoaches, the whole way to Salt Lake City, and visits Brigham Young, talks to him, hangs out with him, and writes a whole book about his travels, being in Salt Lake City, about Brigham Young. And one of the most interesting things about that book, and there's a lot that was interesting, was that he said the Mormons and the Native Americans were basically completely allied, because they're both fighting the Americans in the sort of normal Americans, I guess you'd say, the white people. The Mormons are being persecuted, being hunted down, being fought in wars, and so are the Native Americans. So they're like, let's just, immediately they had a kinship, and I'm sure it's deeper than that too. People suspect that there were psychedelics being used by early Mormons. I don't know. I have not done the research on that. If there's any Mormon people, it'd be great to hear some stuff, even though I'm sure the church doesn't talk about that too much. But that's very much a Native American thing, because we've talked about, like, if America, one of the strongest cases to me that America could be a Garden of Eden or like original kind of land is that most psychedelics originate in the Americas.
That's true.
Most of them. Not all of them, obviously, but when you get outside of the Americas, you're like really stretching it. You have Amanita muscaria, which is like in Northern Europe and Russia and things like that. So it's not like it doesn't exist. They do have psychedelics. But if you go to Africa, it's like barren of psychedelics.
Iboga.
They have ibogaine. They have a few things like that.
Fumes, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
How do you get ibogaine?
I don't know how it's derived.
I think
it's the root.
I think that's one of probably.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the methods, is that they inhale poop fumes.
In Costa Rica, they weren't inhaling poop fumes with.
I don't know much.
With ibogaine.
But in the Americas, you have psilocybin. You have the peyote caps. Mushrooms. You have all these sorts of ayahuascas, and you go down the list. They're basically all from the Americas.
That's true.
And so if we're considering that shamanic practice and like psychedelic drug use is like pivotal or integral to early civilization, well, it makes America or the Americas clearly a top contender. I mean, it's not even.
And would that be the flood of Noah cutting off the supply?
Right.
Could that be the origin of
it's
Noah?
Forbidden fruit and all of these
Gnosis, Noah.
Yeah. Gnosis.
Gnosis. There's something
to
that.
Yeah.
Also, people have said, like, I know Jung, or Shane knows Jung way better.
Yeah.
Professor Longo knows Jung.
That's okay.
I've never read any, but
yeah.
There it is. The black books.
That
many symbols.
That you have the flood being the flood of the unconscious, the unconscious mind being flooded to the point where there's only a small sliver of conscious mind left.
Right.
The unconscious is so filled or obscured, kind of repressed behind whatever, that the flood symbolizes the filling up of our collective unconscious, or the murky, like
the Neptunian,
the dark, you could say, like the darkening of the waters,
right?
Because the unconscious, it goes back to Pisces too, which is water, flood, oceans, and things like that. The symbol for psychiatric studies is the Neptune symbol for Poseidon. Who knows? And this is Enki too, unconscious, unk. You know, that sounds like a stretch, but all these flood words: tank, sink, ink, unk, anchor. You know, sunk. You sunk down at the bottom. That unk root goes back to Enki, Ingvi, and the Ankh, of course, too. The Ankh is an anchor, and it's the cross. That's another whole conspiracy, is that the cross was originally an anchor. And you have a lot of anchor symbolism in early Christianity and Christianity across the board.
Is it anchorites? Isn't it
Anchorites,
it's a whole like sect of Christianity?
And
I've never heard of that. What is that?
I don't know like the details or what their theology is that separates them. I'm sure you could pull it up, but there is a sect called the Anchorites. There's also one I mentioned the other day is Angkor Wat or Angkor Wat in Thailand. I think it's in Thailand.
Yeah.
Or sorry, Cambodia.
Cambodia.
Yeah.
That's another like anchor word that's out there, which is bizarre. How all these things, I don't know, seemingly, like he's saying, you get these common kind of syllables. Or
before we push off of the Mormon thing, I've heard a lot, and this could just be a modern occurrence. Let's just say after Brigham Young's death, but apparently a lot of the Mormon higher up rituals go back to Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Like
that's why they got in so much trouble. That's why Jackson was he was chasing the Indians around right around the same time as the Mormon Wars. I don't know how much Jackson personally, I don't know. I just know more of like the Florida Indian stuff.
Right.
But I know that Jackson was in charge, you know, as a military leader at first, then as president. He's persecuting the Indians. I believe it was him who's leading most of the persecution against the Mormons too, to start off with. I could be wrong. Check. When was Jackson president?
I don't know.
But I believe Andrew Jackson a Freemason. Yes, Andrew Jackson was a Freemason. Okay. Now, if he's the one who's largely persecuting the Mormons, and the Mormons, just like, why was Aleister Crowley called the most wicked man in the world?
I don't know.
Number one, he's doing astrology and yoga in Puritan England. That'll get you a bad reputation. But what did he really do that earned him damnation in the press forever? He printed and published The Secrets of Freemasonry. And that's what got...
And Rosicrucianism. The OTO is a Rosicrucian order. And he's publicly, and the Golden Dawn, he's publishing everybody's secrets, so that'll get you.
That's why his own stopped covering for him, because everyone else was within the fold. You know, if you messed up in public, they'd cover for you. Aleister Crowley was on his own because he was kind of expelled or persona non grata from all these esoteric, you know, mystic institutions, until he printed enough of this, you know, apparently he printed some of their deepest secrets. They said, you have to take that out. You have to never publish this again or we'll kill you. And actually they said, we have to initiate you into Freemasonry. We have to initiate you into the Templars and all this because you've printed our secrets. Either you have to join or we will kill you. And if you print them again, we will kill you. So he kind of was slowly got more and more on their good side. And, you know, it's all personal. He had friends that he was close with. He had people that hated his guts. But he really got that bad reputation, most wicked man in the world, and everyone ran with it because he printed their secrets. Why are the Mormons so ridiculed? Why were the Mormons treated like the Aleister Crowley of frontier America? Because they too not printed but incorporated the secrets of Freemasonry.
Right.
and I'm not a Freemason and I'm not a Mormon, but I know that if there's any of those two who want to get together and see what they have in common, they'll be really surprised. Another part is that the Native American mysticism that comes into this, kind of like what we were just touching on, they have a ritual name or a temple name. And the Mormons have this whole temple, process that like a lifelong, Freemasonry kind of journey that you go on. Is you're a lifelong member of this like temple. That's where all the inner sanctum of Mormonism. You join this Freemasonic kind of group that's within Mormonism. And they do things like ritual immersion and, so they're drawing from a couple different branches of mysticism. But one of the things that they do that they have in common with the Mormons that they found out later, but maybe Joseph Smith cooked them all up together to start off with, is that they have a temple name, a secret name, like an angelic name that you don't even tell your friends or your loved ones. You're given this name like through ceremony, and you don't reveal it till the afterlife.
Wow.
So Masons or branches of Masonry, sects within or adjacent to Freemasonry, have this concept where you have a name. You might have three names. You have your public name.
It's like an ineffable name, or whatever you'd call it, like not to ever be spoken.
Right.
It's common, like you're saying, it's commonly found in magical traditions, including Crowley's tradition. So the Golden Dawn, OTO, Freemasonry, and like he's saying, it's basically a password of sorts to when you sort of go through the afterlife or the bardo, or whatever it is, and you hand over the key to get to the other side, and it is this angelic, like spiritual name, basically, that's for you, and you're supposed to, almost be asked, like, what's the password? And I'm being like not literal, but something along those lines, and it's a way as well to potentially carry forward or be able to remember past lives. So if you're able to hold almost like conscious focus through the afterlife, through focus on this name, almost like a mantra would do, that when you pass through into a previous incarnation or soul, whatever happens, that you would be able to carry forward the whatever things from this life.
It's almost like a tantric principle too, is instead of creating, like this is an end of life, you know what I mean? You're looking at it like it's a threshold into the next life. If you can, part of Tantra, of course, would be like, even within the act of creation, you can maintain things on the mind. I can be thinking of my future, or, a purple circle, right? Or exercises, or whatever you're doing up there. You can kind of separate what you can use, like the thrill of creating life to like maximize your but also the test is to like, can you stay in that kind of hermetic mind space even in the most bestial of acts, right? Well, this is kind of the same thing with the end of life. It's like the test, it's like the ultimate test, like how much chi did you kind of gather together
to be able to hold focus.
Can you hold a memory or a concept?
Even
not only is it a secret that you have to keep through your whole life, but when you die, your consciousness can retain a physical world 3D thought, right? So the soul's going to recycle, but if that's still there, you, like Shane's saying, you keep a tether from one life to the next. Also, you're not allowed to tell this, because if you tell it to anybody else, no matter what you do in that life, if you get to St. Peter or the angel at the afterlife or whatever, and you're asked to give that password, if you told it to someone else, it's worthless.
Right.
So
that's amazing. Well, this is kind of like building on the morphic resonance, and how, like, you only have the evangelists here in this geographical space that we call the America, the Amorica. in the fact that this is a Freemason country.
Playground, yeah.
This is a free Masonic, what we call what people that are constitutionalists or whatever, and the beloved legalese that's inherent to this corporation of the United States of America. It's free Masonic, and to find out that you have the Mormons, going through the same rites as the
right. Yeah, it's all seemingly vibrating.
Yeah, it's resonant.
Yeah,
it's a resonant pattern
for sure. Yeah.
Also, recently I've been looking into the state lines.
Yes.
Because the Garden of Eden in Florida theory largely hinges on the northern state line between
the FAGs.
The FAG region.
Yes.
Yeah, FAG. For the sake of conversation, we'll call it the FAG region.
The FAG region.
The FAG state line, where those three mix, right there, is what, or at least the flat line that goes through the Florida Panhandle.
Mm-hmm.
We call that. It's called the Paracot. I don't know. I gotta check this. Paracot line.
It's an acronym for apricot.
I'm getting this wrong. I'm getting the name wrong. It's close.
Yeah.
Does someone know what it is in the chat?
You were just telling me about this the other day. He was like a sort of Mason and Dixon character.
Line. Yeah.
That he was sent around almost like Mason and Dixon were to map out and survey various areas.
What do they call this?
And that I guess he was quite good and potentially was he a Mason?
Yes. Well, we don't know for sure.
Okay.
But we know that there was the three principal planners of Washington, D.C. was, I'm forgetting all their names. This is recent research for me. I haven't been looking into this for long. But the Paracot line, someone needs to know this.
Yeah, which is weird too, like with Bach Tower in Florida. Have you ever been to Bach Tower?
No, I've just seen it on his channel.
So even a weird, like he's talking about DC and Florida, there's these sort of connections. Bach Tower, which is one of our more mystical, mysterious landmarks. It's in the middle of the state, not near anything. It's an hour from anything. In the middle of orange groves, this guy who was one of the wealthiest men in America decided to erect this giant tower, which is unbelievable. And he's done many videos on it. And I think we've talked with Juan about it in the bookstore on a stream before. And that is certainly interesting, but it was even crazier to learn that the landscape architecture was done by the Olmsted brothers, who are extremely famous because they did much of Washington, D.C. I believe they did the Capitol building. They've done some huge universities, like Ivy League universities and things like that. And they laid out the grounds. And they did Bach Tower, which is like completely bizarre. You're like, why are these two, the most famous landscape architects in the world, hands down. Yeah. Why are they in the middle of Central Florida in an orange grove helping this guy lay out this park and this tower and all of these things? Completely bizarre. And so like he's saying, there's always been some interplay between people who are laying out DC. I don't know if the Olmsted brothers are Masons or not, but I wouldn't be surprised. And people who are laying out DC and people who are laying out Florida in the South. And that parallel that he's talking about lines up with a lot of other things on the planet, on the plane, which I think is a pretty good case as well for the Eden thesis.
Also, Carrera and Hastings in the Bach Tower that he brought up. The most extravagant part of the whole thing is it's called a bronze rapace or gold. It's like brass and gold door on the tower has the scenes of Genesis carved into and what is this place? It's one of the few places that would be sticking out of the water if there were a 500-foot worldwide flood.
Bach Tower.
Bach Tower. Yeah. It's the only place, one of the few places in peninsular Florida that would be sticking out of the water if there were a great sea level rise. Not only that, it's called the Ellicott line, by the way, not Paracott. Ellicott line. The Ellicott line, there's a couple Ellicott lines. There's 3 principal designers of Washington, D.C. Pierre, I think his name is, but L'Enfant. Pierre L'Enfant, I think his name was. Benjamin Banneker was the black guy, mathematician, like he was geometry and, I don't know what his specialty was, but there's a black guy, there's a white guy, and then there's Ellicott. So L'Enfant, Banneker, and then Ellicott. These are the 3 main guys making the decisions, planning. Ellicott, even they say might have even started from scratch, where he didn't like what the other 2 guys were doing, and he actually snuck in most of his designs, and he had to fix some of the issues that the other guys made. So he's one of like kind of the unsung, everyone knows L'Enfant, but not many people know about this Banneker guy and Ellicott. Ellicott, he's tasked personally by George Washington to go to the Mississippi and to chart all the state lines from Mississippi back east. So Florida, the state line, Florida, Alabama, and Georgia, he went and created what's called the Mound Line. He surveyed this himself. He was the first guy to go out and determine the border between Florida and the other territories. There were territories back then. He was, I don't know if he was a Freemason, but one of those guys was a Freemason. Okay. They planned a lot of these state lines with Masonic principles in mind. For example, the Florida Panhandle, today it's the 31st parallel. That goes over to Jerusalem.
Right.
It's the same parallel. It goes through Jekyll Island too. You can't tell me the wealthy people of Jekyll Island didn't take that into consideration. Today, to this day, they have a bar that's called the 31st parallel on Jekyll Island, or a restaurant bar. I think number one, it's the latitude that was bringing a lot of those Greeks and Jews, early Jews over to early America. You're using your instrumentation to determine your position on Earth relative to the North Pole. You're pretty much doing a straight line. If you go across the Atlantic, or you make it across the Atlantic, you'd reposition yourself roughly to the same latitude you came from. I think that's how Noah got it wrong, by the way. When Noah gets off the ark in the Americas, all they tried to do was go back to the latitude that was familiar. So they land in Turkey, then they go back down to the Middle East, and that's where you get your Garden of Eden in the United States, in Iraq. Same latitude as the Florida state line up at the north.
Yeah, if you're navigating, it would be as easy as can be.
And who put that line right there? Who said, okay, the Florida state line is going to go straight through these 4 rivers that are paralleling the 4 rivers in the Garden of Eden? Ellicott and his Freemasonic friends who were surveying the American Southeast.
That's not a coincidence at all.
And where did they cut the border? In Spanish times, it used to be the 32nd degree. 32nd. Then they cut it down to the 31st because the English and the Spanish were disputing. So they cut it down to the 31st. It's been theorized that was because the 32nd had to be reserved for Freemasonry, because we know that one of the largest Freemasonic lodges in America is, I believe, at Savannah, which is at the 32nd degree latitude.
Right.
Because they wanted their headquarters, and that was largely the headquarters of American Masonry in the South, was at Savannah Lodge for a long time at the 32nd latitude. And we know that they put that on the 32nd because of their symbolism with the 32nd degree. It's the highest degree. 33rd is an honorary degree. You can't earn 33rd degree. It has to be gifted to you. Kind of. So they put 32nd. They put that lodge at the 32nd. That's why Savannah is such the big city that it is. Why is Atlanta the big city that it is? because it's connected to those 4 rivers at the Garden of Eden.
Mhm.
Atlantis, Atlanta, and Eden. You know,
Can I ask
That's
you
amazing.
a totally random question? You're talking about the Ark. Have you guys seen Ken Ham's Ark? Were you familiar with his
in Kentucky.
in Kentucky?
Yeah.
What's the deal with that? I mean,
It's a
that's
good
not that far from you, but
a
I'm
good
not
indicator.
sure. Yeah. Have you ever seen it?
No,
Oh,
The Ark Experience in Kentucky.
I haven't.
It was
No.
a full-blown.
It's a full
replica.
reconstruction. It's 500 feet long, and it's like I wouldn't call it a theme park or something, but it's like a tourist attraction.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that the local like city taxpayer funded it for tourism. They gave like This literally cost $100 million,
Oh, that's beautiful.
and it's 50 feet high and 500 feet long. I don't know if it.
Are those the
people
proportions?
figured
Like, because I hear people
Yeah.
bicker about. The
I think it's
proportions.
actually weird. It's like 51 feet high because I think I looked up I hadn't heard about this until somewhat recently. When I looked it up, I remember thinking, why is it 51? That's bizarre.
Uh-huh.
You know, and I don't. The length was somewhere around 500 feet, but I would be curious. I do believe it's built to spec, though. I believe it is supposed to be biblically spec.
Yeah.
In terms of dimensions, height, and width, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because I forget what it
Completely
says.
insane.
Yeah, like the 1 cubit to 10 or whatever.
Right.
Mhm. It's roughly 500 feet long.
Yeah.
Is the general consensus.
Yeah.
That it was.
He'd be a good guy to get on for you to talk to.
What part of Kentucky is that in?
I don't know.
I was just stranded there for a few days.
Yeah.
Some people say that's where we get Arkansas. Arkansas.
The Ark, yeah.
You know, there's lots of Ark
Makes
words
sense.
around the Southeast United States, so some people say, taking E. Calloway's research, there's also this other guy named John C. Keener, who was a influential like preacher in the South Carolina. He believed he didn't know anything about Gopherwood. He didn't know anything about the rivers. He just was looking at the
Between
fossil
Lexington and Cincinnati.
Oh, yeah.
where the KGC was founded.
Really?
Nice.
Lexington, not far from
Yeah,
Lexington.
you're talking about fossils then?
John C. Keener wrote a book in like 1900 or 1915 or something about the Garden of Eden being the Southeast United States. Why did he believe that? Because of the fossil record. Remember, this was like, dinosaurs weren't even really taught in classrooms yet. He was pulling up all these bones, and he said the progenitor or like the ancestor of every single species, major species on Earth, is found in the Southeast United
Makes
States.
complete sense to me.
The plant life, animal and plant life. You have so
All the
much. here.
psychedelics. Bring them with
Yeah.
you.
Psychedelics are here.
Also,
That for me, I'm not like super quick to jump on stuff, to be totally honest. Like I am maybe a little, definitely not skeptic of things, but I'm not like immediately just like, wow, and I get taken to something. I do need a little convincing.
Yeah.
And talking with him about the Garden of Eden thesis and like America being like pre-flood and all of that, the psychedelic aspect, I'm not even kidding, was like for me one of the biggest points because I was like, that is something that you cannot really get around.
Yeah.
If you're working from the proposition that early culture, whatever, pre-civilization, pre-ice age, whatever cultures, that their spirituality and religion was absolutely tied to shamanism, psychedelic use, all of that, there's no way around it. As long as that's your starting point. I mean, you could make the case that that's not true or something. I don't know what the case would be, but that seems generally accepted. The shamanism is universal. So if that's the case, and America is home to a host of psychedelics, they're everywhere. In other places that's not the case at all. Then that's a pretty good point.
Florida, especially too. Psilocybin grows native in Florida. You don't even need cow shit. Sometimes it comes up out of the ground.
I know.
It grows native in his closet.
And Amanita muscaria or fly agaric, we have that here too.
Really?
Yes,
I
sir.
didn't even know.
I didn't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's its closest cousin. It's the same thing. For some people, even classify it as the same.
Oh,
But
wow.
it's a minor difference. It's Amanita muscaria is red typically.
Yes.
In Florida, we have Amanita persicina,
Mm.
which is peach. That's the only difference.
Wow.
It's just as big, just as potent.
Mhm.
One is more peach colored, and ours is more peach colored. But we have it. It grows wild in Florida.
That's so cool.
Then you have the psilocybin tamponensis,
Mhm.
the phoenix mushroom, the philosopher's stone,
Mhm.
the sclerota, the little like
Mhm.
truffle type
Mhm.
things. Those are psychedelic. That is the what was turned into all the drugs on the European drug market. All those psychedelic truffles,
Mhm.
like most of the Amsterdam mushrooms, come from Florida.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because this mushroom guy cloned some from Florida and put them onto the drug market. Those became the number one.
Mhm.
This recreational mushroom was
Yeah.
either the phoenix mushroom itself, which is just the mushroom, the tamponensis, or the truffle of that species.
Mhm.
I don't know, species, whatever the term is.
Yeah.
That truffle that survives the wildfires is one of the most popular recreational mushrooms used in Amsterdam.
That's wild.
And we don't even use it here.
Yeah.
And also the FBI or the DEA, apparently there's clicking noises. So here,
It's the
Oh,
chair.
it's a chair that rocks.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. They're saying
The
clicking noises.
toads too. Right. We have the 5-MeO
Yeah.
DMT.
I have a funny story about
toad
that.
venom. That's another American psychedelic.
Like
That's what started me off.
That's what started me off, because we had German shepherds growing up,
Yeah.
and they would attack the toads
Yeah.
after it would rain. And my dad would be like, "Go throw the toads." So I'd go out in my backyard and grab the bufu toads and start throwing them. And afterwards, I'd come inside and I'd be so artistic. I'd just be like,
way.
yeah, I had it all
That's so
over.
funny that you guys have that same.
Yeah.
Because that's him too. He had an experience with the venom and
Yeah.
it being like a. But again, that's another. If you're making this case that it's the Fertile Crescent, it's the cradle of civilization, and so on, and then you can literally look at a map and be like, oh well, there's psychedelic toads, there's mushrooms, there's ayahuasca. There's,
Look at the Coca-Cola too.
That's right, black drink.
The Opon Holly.
yeah, there's coffee, there's tobacco, there's all stuff.
Mhm.
You're like,
Coffee's, I think it's from.
oh, is it
But there was an
African
indigenous coffee.
Yeah.
There wasn't.
something similar,
There
yeah.
was a coffee
Cocoa.
We
tree.
have it here too.
cocoa,
we
yeah,
have
all that stuff.
we have a native.
Mhm.
Yeah, but just the fact that all these things are all the way around the Gulf of America,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
and so on. And obviously the Amazon. It's like, how can people look at Africa or the Middle East, and of course, landscapes can change. I get that, or even some other place, and be like, oh well, that's where it must have kicked off. It's like, are you kidding me?
No, it's a massive redirect.
I'm not into stoned ape theory or anything, but I'm just saying that if human beings were to take these things, they were definitely taking the Americas. Like in the other places, they're either like Amanita muscaria in Europe.
Yeah.
Is supposedly, I don't know much about it, never taken it. It's supposedly pretty, kind of like a violent experience. It's not like it's a really heavy duty
No, it's
drug.
casual.
Yeah, it's not as casual. Like, it very much rocks you.
Mhm.
It's not like as warm. It's from what I've read, at least.
We're nearing on 2 hours here.
Oh,
Cool.
That's usually what we
Awesome.
go for.
Yeah,
What are you
Mhm.
about? You think
it is
we're
pretty
about
great.
wrapped?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
One last thing to tie this all in: the mushrooms, the Garden of Eden theory, the stoned ape theory, and the Greek. One of the biggest connections to me, syncretisms, whatever you want to call it, is that the name, the word, the term for mushrooms in the Maya and Aztec was flesh of the gods. Flesh of God. God's flesh, his body. The body of flesh, God. And they call that Teo. Teo.
Yeah.
body of God, Teo, Teo, Teo,
Teotihuacan,
however you say
yeah.
it. Teo this, Teo that.
Mhm.
Everything was Teo, the old Mexican people. Maya, also a Greek word. And sorry, for those who don't know, Teo is how you say God or, the divine
Mhm.
in like native Mexican languages. And in Greek, you say Theo
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
Dio.
Yeah.
Latin Dio, Greek Teo, Teo, same thing.
Mhm.
Tilo, even we get
Yep.
back to that too.
Yeah, telos.
So-
Meaning.
Teo, on one side of the Atlantic and the other.
Mhm.
And what was Jesus speaking?
Aramaic,
Well, or whoa,
Greek.
roughly Greek, something.
Greek, yeah.
The Greek-speaking people around then, and it's all getting written down in Greek, especially. Body of God, my flesh, eat my flesh.
Mhm.
What was he calling that?
Mushroom. Eat the
Something
mushrooms.
similar.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
We see that in old Christian artwork. We
Yeah.
see that there is a Greek connection there too, with the Maya and the flesh of the gods, the Eleusinian mysteries.
Mhm.
That just dried up,
Sure.
right?
I just reached out to Jan Irvin, the gentleman who wrote, what was it, Fruit of the Gods, where he was the one that was like showing the Amanita Muscaria
Oh, nice.
connection, but he has since rescinded all of that.
Oh,
Like he
really?
has like gone like really more. I guess you would say, I'm not gonna call it like mainstream Christianity,
Sure.
but he's like he's pulled out of anything dealing with any type of
Pagan
promotion of
roots, yeah.
psychedelics or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, he was the one who originally turned me on to that whole theory with the mushroom being the flesh of God.
Mhm.
Yeah. We've talked about it on a few streams, but I think he's a fan of this. I'm definitely a fan of this idea. I know you love Rupert Sheldrake,
Yeah.
but he's someone who's popularized the idea that, and totally off topic, but you kind of mentioned it goes with psychedelic stuff, that early baptisms were near-death experiences. And
I know that. I know, like,
yeah, and
as much as I could know something from the past,
and we're almost certainly drowning.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Instinctually,
yeah.
that is absolutely, they
Yeah.
were, you,
The second I heard that from Sheldrake,
Yeah.
I was like, that's 100% true.
yeah, yeah.
100%.
And
They were making me pass out underwater.
The
Yeah.
Greek linguistics are you can have more fun with them because they're so ancient and so current to this day.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I can say ocean, for example. Oh, sorry, the mic, gotta watch out. Ocean. I mean, you're talking about like a 2,000-year-old word, if not more, right? We have sometimes more Greek roots in English than Latin.
Mhm.
And the founding fathers, they actually hated Latin, even though they wrote so much and talk about it. They wanted to go back to the Greek,
Nice.
and they were trying to say the Greek, America is going to be a Greek principle. Greek
Yeah.
that's not.
And that's why
Roman.
when you went to college, you went Greek.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what they used to call, like, my parents, like that was before my generation, but my parents,
Yeah.
they're like, you go Greek.
Yeah.
Like when you went to university.
Fraternity.
And
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah,
of
that's funny.
gay stuff.
Yeah.
But the elephant walk.
What's
Damn.
that?
Oh, well, I guess you weren't in. What college did you go to?
I went to Michigan State.
Okay. Well,
Florida State.
Florida State, they do the elephant walk.
Yeah.
But here, I just also wanted to say the Jesus baptisms potentially being like psychedelic experiences, drownings,
Sure.
near death. That's the commonality between those two. I'm not big into the Jesus like trying to rationalize the Jesus like resurrection.
Mhm.
But one of the things that really did it for me, because you hear people talk about how they used to crucify people and they had to drug them because they couldn't go up on the cross.
Yeah, they would have passed out.
They would die from shock
Yeah.
before you'd die from wounds, right?
Yeah.
So, or you would, whatever. They'd thin your blood or they'd do something, right? Or thicken your blood. They'd
Mhm.
give you some drugs that they knew would keep you alive through the torment. And a lot of times they'd take people down and just let them go, But they'd drug people to put them up on the cross. It's been theorized by a lot of people that Jesus was still under the effects of this drug. And again, I don't care what type of Christian you are. These aren't like my beliefs. What did it for me was the linguistics. That Jesus was potentially still under the effects of a drug when put into a tomb. And yes, he got stabbed, whatever.
That goes
But
back to
bear
the
with me.
Egyptians' sarcophagi.
Yeah,
Sure.
but bear with me here. What do we call a drug that puts you under for a long time? You said it. You're right.
Anesthetic.
Anesthetic.
Mhm.
What's the Greek word for resurrection?
No idea.
Anesthesia.
Ah.
The resurrection
Anesthesia.
is an anesthetic. That Jesus was drug. This is not my theory. This is not what I think Christianity boils down to. But the linguistics,
Sure.
because anesthetic apparently has nothing to do with anesthesia.
Mm.
Anesthetic. You took a drug, you were under, you come back, right?
Yep.
Anesthesia, anesthetic.
That's
Anesthesia is what the Greeks called the resurrection. Jesus, I don't know how you say it in Greek, but anesthesia is the resurrection in Greek. So there's something to that. The linguistics, anesthetic, anesthesia.
Mhm.
Maybe Jesus was drugged.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm not trying to reduce the Jesus story or anything
Sure.
like that.
Mhm.
Believe what you want. That's not what I believe, but I'm going to be looking into that.
Yeah.
And that is a Greek connection
Yeah.
between gnosis and the
Mhm.
drug use. And
Sure.
What else? Anything else you want to wrap up?
No, that
on?
was awesome. That tied so many of these loose ends that I've had in my mind into like this really nice.
Yeah.
We have an Anastasia Island in Florida, and we also have a Turtle Island, Turtle Island
Right.
Mhm.
in New Smyrna.
Oh,
And the
nice.
world started in Turtle Island, don't they say? The
Mhm.
world is
Mhm.
Turtle Island. America is Turtle Island,
Mhm.
and Turtle Island is at New Smyrna, Florida.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
There's that resonant pattern again.
Yeah, that too. That sort of geometry of it as well.
It's like a fractal
Yeah.
with the way that's working.
It is, yeah.
All right. So, Toph, you want to tell people what you're up to or what's next for you? Or
Yeah, sure. Go to the Biocharisma YouTube page. I got the Biocharisma podcast. It's on all the players, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of interviews with these two blokes. Got some really good physics coming up in the podcast with Dr. Joseph Farrell, which is kind of fun because we're talking about the civilizations and
Ur. That's one of the big ones that we didn't get to touch on is the Chaldeans, Ur, and
Yeah.
pre-Semitic people being Irish. But
yeah,
good stuff.
that's wonderful. Yeah, so check me out there. And this has been awesome. Like, I love this. You guys, the work
Sure.
that you do and the research that you
Yeah,
do.
we try our best.
I'm
We
really-
just sit in here all day and
hey, but that's the best.
ponder orbs and stuff.
That's
So,
great. I build them, so
Nice.
I've been pondering them for a very long time.
Very
so
good.
I'm there with you.
Shane or Professor Longo, you want to promote your book? Tell them we got almost 500 people in the
Okay.
chat here. So.
Yeah, this is Monad. It's a collection of Neoplatonism, translated by Thomas Taylor, the great Thomas Taylor. Introduction by Ken Wheeler of YouTube, who's a very interesting guy. Talks about a lot of similar physics stuff to Topher.
He's by the new arc.
Yeah, he's in Kentucky. Interesting guy. There's only about 200 copies left of Monad, so it's not coming back. So it's a limited edition. Go check it out at gallowglassbooks.shop. And yeah, that's about it. Got a new book coming out in about a month or 5 weeks. It's going to be Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition by Francis Yates. And yeah, some other things in the works for the rest of the year. That's all I have.
Yeah. Go get a copy of Monad, guys. Gallowglassbooks.shop. Come and hang out at the Dancing Elephant, too, if you want to come see this place. And
Sure.
if you're in Florida, go check out Topher's YouTube, podcasts. He's all, multiple platforms.
Yep.
And Old World Florida, of course. We didn't really intro this too much, but Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Awesome. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. And this is our first meeting.
Yes.
We got to meet Topher for the first time in person.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. Good spot to meet too.
Awesome.
Everyone. See ya.
Yep. Wild Indian, yeah.
Hey V, line them up.
I'm a wild Indian, you know I go crazy. Ain't really Indian, that boy fugazi. I just keep it player, you can never play me. You got an ass so fat, girl, let's make a baby. And another one. Then I'm back to the trap, I'm trying to double some. She a bad woke chick and I love her tongue. We some jurisdiction boys, we some one-on-ones. Look, don't compare me to no Martin dog, I'm like Malcolm X. Die by our freedom, we'll leave a cracker stretch. Round of applause, boy, you know we clapping text. Chucky dog, child play, yeah, nigga, that's what's next. Open up the cans just like Arizona. Pull up masked up like we got the Rona. We set up jurisdictions when we buy the corner. How you claiming that's your hood and you not the owner? Be the B, I just pulled up in the need for speed. Free the land, tell the colonizers that they need to leave. Wild Indian up in my veins, you know how we bleed. You ain't gotta lie about who we is, dog, just keep it G. We at war, we can't keep the peace. Since we at war, gotta keep the peace. Whack a cone, then I meditate. Should I need to breathe? Keep a Olmec head when we slide, dog, cause we the shit.
Like my niggas said, bitch, we the shit. I can't keep the peace. If it pop off, then I want a piece. I'm just on release. I'm in go mode, motherfuck the thief. In these streets like EBT, when we at war, make peace with me. I don't give a damn, understand. Fuck who stole this land, white or black or tan. Understand, it's fuck who stole this land. Might have seen me get little buddy these hands. He wasn't no abo man. Now these dudes is Sambo man. They full of shit like my ammo can. What they call an N-word out the wrong mouth as an ambulance. Wild Indian, get it in advance, or you can post date it. Ask around, I'm the most hated. Straight sacred, they stole acreage. Go ape shit, show ain't shit. It won't be televised, I don't tape shit.
Be the B, I just pulled up in the need for speed. Free the land, tell the colonizers that they need to leave. Wild Indian up in my veins, you know how we bleed. You ain't gotta lie about who we is, dog, just keep it G. We at war, we can't keep the peace. Since we at war, gotta keep the peace. Whack a cone, then I meditate. Should I need to breathe? Keep a Olmec head when we slide, dog, cause we the shit.